Something just happened in the Strait of Hormuz that the financial press is completely burying. And if you don't understand what it means right now, you are going to be blindsided by what comes next. The ASG-1 has breached Hormuz Command, the blockade has collapsed, and the ripple effects of that single event are going to move through energy markets, currency systems, and geopolitical alliances in ways that most analysts haven't even begun to map out yet. So stay with me, because I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened, exactly why it matters, and exactly who is going to win and who is going to lose from this moment forward. Let's start with geography, because geography is destiny. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a body of water. It is the single most important choke point on the planet for global energy flows. Roughly 20% of all the world's oil passes through that narrow strip of water every single day. 20%. When you fill up your car, when you heat your home, when you buy anything that was manufactured, transported, or grown using industrial machinery, there is a very real chance that the energy powering that process came through the Strait of Hormuz at some point in its journey to you. This is not an abstract geopolitical fact. This is personal. This hits your wallet, your grocery bill, your heating costs, and the price of everything you buy. So when someone tells you that a blockade in the Strait of Hormuz has collapsed, you need to understand that this is not a military story. This is an economic story, and it is one of the biggest economic stories of the year. Now, let's talk about what Hormuz Command actually was and why its collapse is such a significant moment. For years, the strategic logic around the Strait of Hormuz has been built on a simple premise: control the choke point, control the energy, control the leverage. The United States Navy has long positioned itself as the guarantor of freedom of navigation through the Strait, which sounds noble until you realize what that really means in practice. It means that Washington gets to decide whose oil flows and whose doesn't. It means that sanctions become enforceable not just on paper, but in physical reality, because if your tanker can't pass through the Strait without American approval, then American financial and military power becomes the operating system of global energy trade. That is an extraordinary amount of leverage to hold over the rest of the world, and it is leverage that Washington has used aggressively, repeatedly, and without apology for decades. The question was always, what happens when someone credibly challenges it? That challenge has now arrived, and the mainstream media is doing everything it can to minimize it, contextualize it, and bury it under a mountain of distraction. But you deserve the real analysis, so here it is. The breach of Hormuz Command by ASG-1 represents something that hasn't happened in a very long time in that region: a direct, successful operational challenge to the enforcement architecture that underpins American energy dominance in the Persian Gulf. This is not a skirmish. This is not a provocation. This is a structural event. When a blockade collapses, it doesn't just mean that ships can pass through. It means that the credibility of the entity enforcing that blockade has taken a serious and very public hit. And in geopolitics, credibility is everything. Once you show that the enforcement mechanism can be broken, you have fundamentally changed the calculation for every single actor in the region and beyond. Think about what that means for Iran. First of all, Iran has been living under some of the most punishing economic sanctions in modern history. Washington has used its control of the financial system and its naval presence in the Gulf to strangle Iran's ability to export oil, access international banking, and participate in the global economy. The theory was that enough economic pressure would either force a change in Iranian behavior or destabilize the government from within. That theory has not worked. What it has done instead is push Iran closer to Russia, closer to China, and deeper into the emerging non-dollar trading architecture that Beijing and Moscow have been quietly building for the better part of a decade. Every time Washington tightened the screws, Iran found new workarounds. And now, with the breach of Hormuz Command, Iran and its allies have demonstrated something operationally significant: that the physical enforcement of those sanctions is not as ironclad as Washington wanted everyone to believe. And here's where it gets really serious, because what just happened in the Strait doesn't only affect Iran. It sets a precedent that every country currently sitting under the boot of American sanctions is watching very, very carefully right now. Let's zoom out and put this in the broader context of what's been happening to the American-led global order over the last several years, because this event did not happen in a vacuum. You have to understand the trajectory to understand the significance of this moment. Since 2014, and accelerating dramatically after 2022, the world has been quietly but unmistakably reorganizing itself around a simple question. Does the dollar-based American enforced system of global trade still serve everyone's interests, or has it become a weapon that Washington uses primarily to serve its own? The answer that more and more countries are arriving at is the second one. And when countries arrive at that answer, they start looking for exits. China has been building those exits systematically. The Belt and Road Initiative, the expansion of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the development of the CIPS payment system as an alternative to SWIFT, the push to price oil in yuan, all of these are pieces of the same puzzle. They are infrastructure, both physical and financial, designed to make it possible for countries to conduct trade, move money, and sell commodities without going through the American-controlled nodes of the global system. Russia accelerated this process massively when it was cut off from SWIFT after 2022, because suddenly the theoretical question of whether you could run a major economy outside the dollar system became a live experiment. And the answer to the considerable discomfort of Washington was yes. It's harder, it's costlier, but it is possible. And the more countries invest in building these alternative systems, the less costly and the more viable they become. The collapse of the Hormuz blockade fits directly into this story, because the physical choke points of global trade, the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, the Strait of Malacca, are not separate from the financial architecture of dollar dominance. They are part of the same system. American naval power enforces American financial power. The ability to sanction a country only has teeth if you can also physically prevent that country from trading. If you can freeze someone out of SWIFT, but they can still move their oil through the Strait, they have a workaround. And if they can move their oil and price it in yuan or rubles or a basket currency through a system that bypasses SWIFT entirely, then the sanctions regime starts to look a lot less like an iron cage and a lot more like a very expensive inconvenience. This is why the breach of Hormuz Command is so significant. It is not just a military event, it is a crack in the enforcement architecture of the entire dollar-based global order. And cracks have a way of spreading. But stick with me, because I haven't even gotten to the part that directly affects your money, your savings, and the price of everything you're buying right now. That's coming up, and it's the part that changes how you need to think about the next 12 months. Now let's talk about oil prices, because that's where the average person feels this most immediately and most painfully. The conventional wisdom in financial markets right now is that oil prices are being held down by a combination of slowing global demand, OPEC production decisions, and the ongoing expansion of American shale output. And there's some truth to all of that, but the conventional wisdom is missing the bigger picture, as it almost always does. What just happened in the Strait of Hormuz introduces a level of supply-side risk that the market has not fully priced in yet. When you have a credible challenge to the enforcement architecture that keeps the Strait open and predictable, you introduce the possibility, not the certainty, but the real and serious possibility of disruption to 20% of the world's daily oil supply. Markets hate uncertainty more than they hate bad news. Bad news, they can price; uncertainty, they cannot. And what we now have in the Persian Gulf is genuine, operationally demonstrated uncertainty about whether the world's most critical energy choke point can be kept open and predictable by the power that has been guaranteeing it for the last several decades. That uncertainty is going to show up in oil prices. It may not happen immediately. Markets have a tendency to sleepwalk into crises, but the risk premium for Gulf oil is going to rise. And when oil prices rise, everything rises. Transport costs rise, manufacturing costs rise, food prices rise, the cost of living rises. And the people who feel that the most are not the hedge fund managers and the oil executives. It's you. It's ordinary people trying to manage a household budget in an economy where the price of everything keeps going up while wages keep falling behind. There is also a second order effect here that almost nobody is talking about, and it goes directly to the question of dollar dominance and what the collapse of the blockade means for the future of the petrodollar system. The petrodollar is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented historical arrangement that has been the backbone of American financial power since the 1970s. The basic deal was simple. Gulf oil would be priced in dollars, and petrodollar surpluses would be recycled back into American Treasury bonds. This arrangement gave Washington something extraordinary: the ability to run persistent trade deficits and government debt at a scale that would have bankrupted any other country, because there was always a captive global demand for dollars, driven by the simple fact that if you want to buy oil, you need dollars first. That arrangement has been under pressure for years. Russia started pricing some of its energy exports in rubles and yuan after 2022. China has been pushing Gulf producers to accept yuan for oil purchases. Saudi Arabia has been quietly exploring alternatives to exclusive dollar pricing. And now, with the operational demonstration that American military enforcement of Gulf energy flows is not guaranteed, the conversation in every Gulf capital is going to shift. Because the deal was always, we price our oil in dollars and you keep the Strait safe. If Washington can no longer credibly guarantee that second part of the bargain, the Gulf states have every rational incentive to renegotiate the first part. And when the petrodollar arrangement starts to crack, and I mean really crack, not just at the edges, the consequences for the American economy, for inflation, for interest rates, and for your standard of living are profound. We're going to get into exactly that in just a moment, so do not go anywhere. Let me tell you about something that doesn't get enough attention in these discussions, and that's the role of China as the strategic beneficiary of everything I've just described. China is the world's largest importer of oil. It is also Iran's largest trading partner and one of the primary architects of the alternative financial infrastructure I mentioned earlier. When the Hormuz blockade collapses, China wins in multiple ways simultaneously. It wins because its energy supply chain becomes more secure and less subject to American interdiction. It wins because the credibility of American military power in the region takes a visible hit. It wins because Gulf states are now more open to Chinese security guarantees and financial arrangements as an alternative to exclusive American patronage. And it wins because every crack in the dollar-based system makes the yuan-based alternative more attractive to more countries. Beijing has been playing a very long game here, while Washington has been focused on short-term leverage, sanctioning this country, pressuring that government, deploying this carrier group. China has been building the institutional and infrastructural foundations of an alternative world order, not loudly, not aggressively, quietly, systematically, and with extraordinary patience. The Belt and Road Initiative alone has given China economic footholds in over 100 countries. The expansion of BRICS to include Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, Egypt, and Ethiopia means that the bloc now includes the world's largest oil producers, the world's largest oil consumer, and some of the fastest growing emerging economies. That is not an accident. That is a deliberate, decades-long strategy coming to fruition. And what just happened at the Strait of Hormuz is another piece of that strategy clicking into place. Not because China necessarily orchestrated it directly, but because China benefits from it structurally. Every time the American enforcement architecture shows a crack, China's alternative looks more viable, more attractive, and more necessary. Now, I want to come back to something I said earlier because I think it's the most important thing I'll say in this entire video, and I want to make sure it really lands. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a shipping lane, it is a symbol. It is the most visible and concrete expression of the proposition that American military and financial power can order the world in a way that serves American interests. When that symbol gets cracked, when a blockade enforced by that power collapses in real time, the psychological and political effect goes far beyond the immediate military situation. Every government in the world that has been sitting under American sanctions, every government that has been pressured into dollar dependence, every government that has been told there is no alternative to the American-led system, they are all watching. And what they are seeing is that the system has a vulnerability, that the enforcement mechanism can be challenged, that the alternative is becoming real. I'm going to show you exactly what this means for the dollar, for gold, for your savings, and for the economic landscape of the next decade, and why the window to position yourself correctly is narrowing faster than most people realize. Don't miss it. This is the kind of moment that historians look back on as a turning point, not because one event changes everything overnight, never works that way, but because certain events crystallize a shift that has been building for years and make it undeniable. The breach of ASG-1 through Hormuz Command is that kind of event. It is the moment where the abstract conversation about the decline of American hegemony and the rise of a multipolar world order became concrete and operational. It happened. It was witnessed. It cannot be unwound. And the reason you need to understand this right now, today, is not because you're a geopolitical analyst or a foreign policy expert. It's because the decisions that get made in the coming weeks and months in response to this event, decisions made in Washington, in Beijing, in Riyadh, in Tehran, in Moscow, are going to show up in your energy costs, your food prices, your interest rates, and the value of your savings. The geopolitical is personal. It always has been. The people who understand that and who act on it with clear eyes and accurate information are the people who come out of turbulent periods with their financial lives intact. The people who don't are the ones who wake up one day and wonder why everything costs twice as much and their savings are worth half as much and nobody warned them. Consider yourself warned. The dollar's in trouble, not tomorrow, not next year, right now. And what just happened at the Strait of Hormuz is the kind of event that accelerates a process that was already well underway. Let me be direct with you. The petrodollar system, which has been the foundation of American economic power since 1974, is cracking. And when it cracks completely, the consequences for ordinary Americans and for anyone holding dollar-denominated savings are going to be severe. Here is what most financial commentators will not tell you. The dollar's strength is not based on the American economy's productivity. It is not based on sound fiscal policy. America is running deficits that would embarrass a developing nation. It is based almost entirely on the fact that global oil trade is conducted in dollars, which means every country on earth needs to hold dollars in reserve just to keep their economy running. That is the petrodollar. That is the engine of American financial dominance. And the collapse of the Hormuz blockade just put a very large crack in that engine. Think about what happens when Gulf states start pricing oil in yuan. It sounds technical, it isn't. It means that the artificial global demand for dollars, the demand that allows Washington to print money, run deficits, and export inflation to the rest of the world, starts to evaporate. And when that demand evaporates, the dollar weakens. When the dollar weakens, import prices rise. When import prices rise, your cost of living goes up. Everything you buy that is made overseas, which is most things, gets more expensive. And the Federal Reserve faces an impossible choice. Raise interest rates to defend the dollar and crash the economy, or let inflation run and watch the dollar's purchasing power erode year after year. And here is the part that should make every person with a savings account sit up straight. Because what comes next is not theoretical. It is already happening. Gold knows. Gold always knows. While politicians and mainstream economists have been telling you that the dollar is fine and the system is stable, central banks around the world have been buying gold at the fastest pace in modern history. China, Russia, India, Turkey, Poland, they are all accumulating gold aggressively. These are not dumb institutions. They are positioning themselves for a world where the dollar is no longer the unquestioned global reserve currency. They see what is coming and they are acting on it. The question is, whether you are going to act on it too, or whether you are going to wait until the crisis is visible to everyone, which is always too late. The window to protect yourself is not permanently open. When currency crises happen, they happen fast. One day the system looks stable, the next day confidence breaks, capital moves, and the people who were not positioned correctly lose decades of savings in a matter of months. This is not a prediction of apocalypse. This is a description of how monetary history actually works over and over again throughout every civilization that has ever overextended its currency. What you are watching unfold right now, the breach at Hormuz, the expansion of BRICS, the yuan oil deals, the gold accumulation, the slow erosion of dollar dominance, this is not chaos. This is a controlled, deliberate, decade-long project to build an alternative to the American financial system. And it has reached the point where it is no longer theoretical. It is operational. It is real. And the ASG-1 breach just proved that the military enforcement arm of that system is no longer unassailable. The bottom line is this: we are living through one of the great geopolitical and financial transitions in modern history. The unipolar American-dominated world order that emerged after 1991 is giving way to something new, a multipolar world where China, Russia, and a growing coalition of the global South have the economic and now the military tools to challenge American dominance in concrete, operational ways. That transition is not going to be smooth. It is going to be disruptive, inflationary, and deeply uncomfortable for anyone whose financial life is entirely dependent on the stability of the dollar-based system. The people who come through this transition successfully are the people who see it clearly, understand it honestly, and take sensible steps to diversify away from pure dollar dependence. That means hard assets. That means gold and silver. That means understanding that the next decade is going to look very different from the last 3 decades and planning accordingly. You have been warned. The question now is what you are going to do about it.